What up, everybody? Welcome back to Roundball Stew, Week 20. I'm joined with Raphielle Johnson. I'm Dan Titus from Yahoo Sports. Want to encourage you guys, if you're in the chat, please hit us up with your questions. We know it's crunch time. Fantasy playoffs are right around the corner for most public leagues, so we definitely want to give you some insight and make sure that you guys are ready for take home this championship. But Raph, what's good, bro? How was your week? How's anything crazy that went on?
No. Well, actually, obviously, those of you who may follow college basketball, you got conference tournaments going on.
Oh yeah.
And I'm in a fantasy league where throughout the course of a season, we draft teams. And based on how they do in the NCAA tournament, or even if they win the NIT, you get points. And the winner wins a good amount of cash. I was lucky enough to win last year.
Nice.
But it's always fun when you watch one of your draft picks, in my case, Eastern Washington, get bounced from their conference tournament on a buzzer beater from about 30 feet out. So, yeah, they won't be in a tournament, so I won't gain any points from there. But, yeah, conference tournament time, NCAA tournament time, and obviously fantasy NBA playoffs right around the corner too, like you said.
Yeah, that sounds like fun on that college conference tournament because I don't really get into March Madness until I don't know, next week when I'm filling out my bracket. So, like having a sense of, paying attention to the conference championship, you usually get a good read on who could take that momentum into the tournament, stuff like that. So that's actually pretty cool. And you're playing with house money now, I'm assuming. How long have you been doing that since you took home the prize last year?
I've been in it 3 years. The first year I was lucky enough to pick the national champion, which was Baylor. So I won some money back, but the big one's getting all those points from your teams doing well in the tournament. So
yeah. I see that. And so we're here to talk about fantasy basketball. Obviously you got to talk about probably the most popular story in the NBA right now, Ja Morant, and what's going on with him. Obviously he's not going to be back with the team for quite some time. He's checked into rehab now. So hopefully he gets better, gets the help he needs to get back on the court, because he's one of the most exciting, polarizing players in the NBA. But as fantasy managers, we gotta look forward and move on.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for Tyus Jones going forward?
Tyus Jones to the moon. We've seen this before with Ja's injuries in the past, where Tyus Jones steps in. The production improves, and it doesn't come at the expense of turnovers. I think ever since his high school days, he's been a lead at taking care of the basketball.
Right.
So, he's 55% rostered in Yahoo leagues, which is way too low given the situation and the fact that we don't know exactly when Ja Morant's going to be back, if he's going to be back this season or even before fantasy playoffs are done. So obviously Tyus Jones, if he's still available in your league, I'm not going to get disrespectful and question the validity of your league, but he needs to be picked up.
Yeah, I think it's going. He's probably not available in most leagues. I would definitely question that credibility as well. But you can't say enough how good Tyus Jones is. And you talked to that assist to turnover ratio. He's second in the NBA on Imani Morris at almost 5.1 to 1. So that's just crazy. In terms of a point guard that handles the ball, that's going to be seeing more opportunities. Like, you want someone that can take over the ball and not actually hurt you in that category, like many other people do with that kind of usage. But it's just been really impressive. It's been really impressive on what Tyus Jones has done this season compared to previous seasons when Ja Morant's missed games. Last year, 38 games without Ja Morant. He was solid, 13 points, around 6-7 assists, but now it's like jumped to 19 points and almost 8 dimes. So, I think you can expect a lot from Tyus Jones, like league winning potential type of thing down the stretch here. But then also on Memphis, news came out. I don't know why these headphones can't stay in my ears today. Brandon Clark tore his Achilles, brutal injury for them. They were already obviously dealing with Steven Adams being out with his injury, his PCL injury, and he's still not ready to return. He's been doing 5-on-5 court work, but there's been no official timetable. So do you think that Xavier Tillman is actually a player that's going to hold value for the at least the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I believe so. Before the Clark injury, you could kind of justify not picking up Tillman. But now that that's happened, like you mentioned, Steven Adams is still without like a clear timeline, even though he's done a bit more in practice recently. I think Xavier Tillman's a guy. I don't know if I can really trust Santi Aldama, even though he's going to have more opportunities. I think Tillman, he had a double-double last night in their loss to the Lakers. Effective rebounder, good field goal percentage. He's not going to be too much out of character offensively. So I think he's someone that you should pick up right now if he's available.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Xavier Tillman is definitely the ad along with Tyus Jones. But let's talk about Dillon Brooks while we're here. God, did you watch that game last night? Just brick after brick after brick. I can't roster him, man. I don't care about his opportunity with Ja out. Like, he's not an efficient player. He'll give you some steals, but I don't know. He's definitely more of a real life player. And I don't even know if that's going to hold without Ja there. So I could see definitely Memphis starting to climb down this Western Conference race. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, you're not picking up Dillon Brooks, are you?
No. It's a hard situation. He didn't have any other stats outside of the points last night, and he shot it poorly. So if you're not going to get someone steals or defensive stats or assists in that spot, you're not really of good use fantasy-wise. And with Ja out, having more shots available, I think that's the worst possible thing for Dillon Brooks. He's already shooting below 40%. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better with him there.
Yep, I agree with that. Let's talk about Damian Lillard for a second, because over the last month, he's number one in fantasy per game value, averaging 38 points per game, with almost 7 rebounds and 7 assists. I mean, I think it's pretty clear this is the best season Dame's ever had. And what's even more crazy is that they may not make the playoffs as a result of this. But yeah, just want to get your thoughts on. We might as well just stick with the Blazers real quick. Anthony Simon's out with an ankle injury. He aggravated that ankle. So, I mean, we could see Damian Lillard probably be one of the most important players down the stretch here, along with Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, those types of players.
Yeah, he's definitely in that class heading into fantasy playoff time. Beyond that, maybe Cam Reddish is someone that people will finally be able to trust. Not so much in terms of
crazy, right?
production. Yeah, not so much in terms of production, because that's still kind of a roller coaster, but they're going to need his scoring, and he's going to play plenty. Matisse Thybulle, he's starting as well. The defensive stats, what you're looking for with him. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of Dame and a lot of Jeremy Grant down the stretch too for Portland.
Yeah, I wrote about Matisse Thybulle earlier this week. I was really surprised to see how much he's taken that leap from the 3-point line, averaging almost 5 per game, or 5 attempts per game, and making at a 46% clip, which is, it makes me wonder as a Sixers guy, in my past, why you couldn't, explore those options and given him more opportunities to shoot. But I think it's just it's more of the chemistry with that team. And obviously, Matisse Thybulle is not going to be someone you're going to be relying on when you don't have to. But the Portland Trailblazers are just so injury riddled right now that, they have to go through those depths of their roster to get value. But yes, threes and steals, I think Matisse Thybulle is still worth rostering. And we'll get to the injuries a little bit later, but I just saw in a report that Jusuf Nurkic was upgraded to questionable. So do you think does that change the landscape at all for you, for Drew Eubanks? Any expectations you have for Nurkic coming back here, especially because they're going to need him, if they're going to try to make this run for the play-in tournament?
I think they're going to have to take the slow play approach with Nurkic. He kind of rushed back from the initial calf injury and ended up aggravating it. So I think for that reason, even with him fighting to get into a playoff spot or a play-in tournament spot, they're going to have to take it easy with him. Eubanks hasn't been great fantasy-wise. He's been dependable enough where you can justify having him on your roster, but he really hasn't jumped off the page. So I think I would lean towards letting him go when Nurkic gets back, even if there's probably going to be a minutes restriction of some sort, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. Joel Embiid, averaging 34 points per game over the last 2 weeks. I mean, he's not rebounding that much. I think it's been kind of surprising. He's had 7 and 5 rebounds over the last couple of games. But I mean, the efficiency from where he's shooting from the field, over 60% over those games. He's just been dominant. Like, there's no other way to put it, just straight up dominant. But I would like to see a little bit more effort, on the glass there. But he's doing he's getting defensive stats too. So it's not all of a loss, but he's just been absolutely phenomenal. Has your position changed at all between him and Jokic in the MVP race?
Man, that's a good question. I'm trying to ignore the MVP conversation, to be honest.
So much banter.
It just gotten so toxic, man. But I think those are 2 of the clear favorites. I lean towards Jokic, but I can see a good argument for Embiid as well. I just want us to get to a point where we don't have to knock down one in order to prop up the other. And that doesn't seem to be happening. So I'd just rather ignore it at this point.
Yeah, the ESPN discourse, you can miss me with that. But let's talk about something that actually brings you joy, and that's the New York Knicks. And I want to talk about Immanuel Quickley first, because he just made a gigantic leap up the sixth man of the year. He's now the favorite for the award after the Knicks reeled off 9 wins in a row at one point. Did lose to the Charlotte Hornets the other night, but it was pretty much a letdown spot. They're about to take this road trip. Got some nationally televised games. Do you think that your Knicks have turned the corner and you're going to surprise in the playoffs? Because this is the thing, man. Like, I have so many Knicks fans or Knicks friends in my group chat sending me literally every blog post, every hot take that's now just coming to eat crow for. The slander for the Knicks in the beginning of the season to where they're at now is just really amazing to see. I actually think it's great because I was actually a fan of the Jalen Brunson move. I thought he was supremely underpaid. I knew he was just going to make a difference, but I think Immanuel Quickley and Mitchell Robinson have been the biggest, benefactors, at least right now in this stretch run. So give me your thoughts on Quickley and Mitchell Robinson real quick.
I'm kind of wondering if the odds makers are trying to take people for a few dollars here. Because as good as Quickley has been, say the last 40 some odd games of the season, I don't know if he's that much better than, say, even a Malcolm Brogdon. I think as well as he's played off the bench in Boston. I'm not entertaining the Russell Westbrook discourse on this, even though he did come off the bench with the Lakers. I don't know if he's going to be in that conversation. Quickley should be one of the favorites, but I don't know if I would have him as the betting favorite, even with the stretch of games that he's played without Brunson recently. And you mentioned Mitchell Robinson. That was huge. Getting him back in there, defensive anchor. They were able to keep things up offensively in terms of offensive rebounding with either Hartenstein or Jericho Sims. But there's a clear difference in the middle defensively for that group. So getting him back is big. I just want to get out of the first round. I'm not really too worried about making grand statements beyond that. But yeah, let's just get to the first round, hopefully in that 4-5 matchup, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, that's what I think that they're going to end up doing this year. They're going to probably, get that first round victory. Might take a team 6 or 7 games in the second round, but by all accounts, it was a really good season. So Mitchell Robinson, though, double in 5 of his last 7 games. I think he's just been tremendous. Not only, being able to switch and protect the rim, but I mean, he's just that difference maker. So I would love to see his ascension come into that echelon of all defensive, team consideration, because I think he's certainly getting warranted for it. Wanted to also chat about the Western Conference in general. Between the 9 and the 13 seed, only 2 games separate those seedings. So very tight race, which I think is good for fantasy purposes, because usually around this time we already had the delineation of, all right, this team's just mailed it in. The Detroit Pistons, which we'll talk about, the San Antonio Spurs, but the Thunder are competitive. The Utah Jazz are competitive. Yeah. They're sitting here right with the Lakers, the Portland Trail Blazers. It's a very interesting race, and the Clippers are just sliding down the opposite direction. And then the Grizzlies issues. I think this is going to actually make for some pretty exciting times for fantasy managers, because maybe we won't see as much load management because these games actually matter now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the one concern you'd have would be Oklahoma City, just because of their schedule this week. They've got the second game of a back-to-back tonight in Phoenix, and they've got another road back-to-back Saturday and Sunday against the Pelicans and Spurs. So we've seen them play well without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but if you have him rostered, you're talking about a top 5 player who could be playing 2 games this week instead of 4. Or 3 max, now that he's already been ruled out for tonight. So that's a concern there. Their week 21 schedule's 3 without any back-to-back, so you're probably safe there. But if you started your playoffs this week, it's kind of a tough hit to take right there, I think.
Yeah, that plus Jalen Williams being ruled out for a couple of games with his wrist injury. This is going to be the Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, I guess. They're going to be definitely hurting for some people. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's already been ruled out for for Wednesday's contest. So, this is definitely something you're going to have to navigate. And it was already mentioned by Mark Daigneault that they're going to be monitoring his minutes down the stretch. May not be resting altogether, but there could be some maintenance ahead for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But since we're talking about injuries, make sure you download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available on the App Store today. So we did have some other injuries to talk about. Robert Williams is dealing with a hamstring injury. What are your concerns about him for the rest of the fantasy playoffs? Because I definitely have some concerns just based on the standings of the Boston Celtics. They've lost a few games. Now the Bucks are kind of separating them at the 1 seed. And I think that they're going to need him in the playoffs. So what do you think that this means for fantasy managers?
Yeah, it's a really bad deal. If you've been around sports long enough, you know how tricky hamstring injuries can be. And at this point, they know they're going to the playoffs. There's a clear separation between the top 3 teams in the East and then everyone else. So at worst, if you're Boston, you're looking at a 3 seed if Philadelphia catches them. So I think they're more worried about making sure that Robert Williams is healthy for the postseason, the actual postseason. And fantasy-wise, that's not a good situation to be in if you have him rostered. If you look ahead to week 21, they've got 4 games with a back-to-back. So, and I don't know when he's going to be back. I don't think we've had an announced timeline there. So him and some of the other guys may end up getting those occasional rest days with an eye towards the actual playoffs.
Yeah. That one's going to be tough. I don't have too many shares of Robert Williams, but, we're just going to have to keep him on IL and hope for him to come off. But, the Celtics do play 4 games in week 21. I don't think he's going to be coming back that soon. So this is something you're going to have to monitor, unfortunately. But wanted to also talk about the Warriors. Andrew Wiggins is still out for personal reasons. Steph Curry made his return. Are you concerned about Donte DiVincenzo going forward and any other players for the Wizards or for the Warriors, maybe Jordan Poole?
I think Donte is going to be fine. Basically be the type of player we kind of expected him to be all season long, kind of that glue guy who can get you some miscellaneous stats across the board. I'm a bit more concerned about Jordan Poole because you look at his fantasy profile, I think he's got a lot in common with, say, an RJ Barrett, where he's going to be out there playing a lot of minutes, but he isn't particularly efficient. And that really weighs down his fantasy value. His shot selection at times can be infuriating, and I'm just sitting on the couch watching. So I just imagine what some of his teammates may think of the decisions, because unlike a Steph Curry or a Klay Thompson, I don't really think he has that kind of equity in terms of making those decisions. So he has to be rostered because of his role, but it's a situation where you either try to make up the field goal percentage and turnovers with other players, or you just take that hit.
Yeah, his production from a reserve role is just completely different as a starter. He drops off considerably to almost 15 points and 5 assists. But the first 2 games back with Steph in the lineup, 10 points, 11 points, a few boards, few assists. So cut down on the turnovers, at least in the short term. But, there's always that opportunity for him to just have those spike games of 5 that can really hurt you in fantasy. So, yeah, I do have a bit of concern now that Jordan Poole is coming off the bench. If he were starting, I would feel a lot better about it. But it looks like Donte DiVincenzo is going to continue to hold in that Wiggins spot in the lineup. So I don't think that Steve Kerr is going to shake that up. Needs that defense out there and that playmaking ability that sometimes Jordan Poole can be a little bit erratic. And the Pistons, what's going on with them, man? Like, it's just, so Hamidou Diallo's out for the season, unfortunately. I thought that he was going to be a really good player for fantasy managers, especially with their schedule the next couple of weeks. Bojan Bogdanovic is dealing with Achilles injuries, but I don't know. He's a veteran. They're tanking. Makes a lot of sense for them not to play him right now. So who's worth adding? I mean, James Wiseman has been stellar. Marvin Bagley as well. Like, are those the only 2 guys you can really rely on? I'm not dropping Jaden Ivey yet after Burks has been out too. So I don't know. There's just so much going on with this lineup. Can you trust anyone really?
Not really. Wiseman's still at 41% in Yahoo leagues. So I think he's someone you can definitely go out and add since he's been starting for Jalen Duren. Bagley's at about 59, 60%. So he'll be a little bit tougher to find. But I think besides those two, I don't really know if there's anyone else. Like Rodney McGruder got a start the other night. Can't trust him. RJ Hampton, can't trust him.
Isaiah Livers, I was thinking about maybe.
Isaiah Livers is one, maybe in like extremely deep leagues you can take a flyer on with their schedule. But yeah, unless it's one of the two bigs or Jaden Ivey, who's already going to be rostered, I don't really think you can trust anyone fantasy-wise right now.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I would just stream it as you go. If you need somebody to get there on a slate that's not a big slate, just to get some production, look at the injury report and try to see what matchup you can exploit there. For the Lakers, D'Lo is going to be coming back from his ankle injury, I believe, on Friday. What does that mean for Dennis Schroder or maybe Austin Reaves, who I think has been, a really good pickup?
I think it means more for Schroder than it does Reaves. I really think Schroder has to be a starter in order for him to give you proper fantasy value. Reaves, we've seen him do good things, whether it's coming off the bench or starting. Been coming off the bench recently, so I prefer Austin Reaves. I think once Russell is back, I would probably drop Schroder personally.
Yeah, Schroder doesn't really actually do much, even though he's listed as a point guard. He's not really a point guard. Yeah. He doesn't really get much opportunities to score or to facilitate. It's actually been Austin Reaves that's been the primary facilitator the last couple of games. 8 dimes 2 games ago, 7 dimes last night. Just been phenomenal. And he's in the closing lineup. Dude's playing with swag, man. Like he had this one, up and under finesse layup that was like beautiful on Jaren Jackson Jr. last night. And yeah, I got to feel like Austin Reaves is definitely going to have some staying power here. He definitely looks like he's legit. AD last night, Darvin Ham called a wilt. That was, I don't know if I'm going to go wilt status, but it was definitely Shaq status, man, because he was all over the place. 30, 20, the blocks, man, he was just phenomenal. That's the AD. When he was named in the top 75, that's the AD I was expecting to see. Yeah. He shows up every once in a while, but like, with injuries and everything, but I think that definitely cemented, like that's the AD when he's at his best. Like that was crazy.
Agreed.
So yeah, we talked about it last week, but I'm still doing this damn slow draft for fantasy baseball. It's insane, man. Like I think I'm in like the 26th round or something like that. Like I love fantasy, man, but like I shouldn't be drafting for 3 or 4 weeks now. But for anyone that needs to get any advice on fantasy baseball, what are you doing?
You need to go purchase the Rotoworld Baseball Draft Guide. Get all the player profiles, rankings, projections that you need for those drafts, whether they're fast or extremely slow, like our friend Dan is dealing with. Just go to NBCSportsEdge.com/draft guide. Use the code PENNANT25. That's PENNANT 25 to save 25% at checkout.
And one last add to the injury report. Zion Williamson is not close to returning. He's a drop now. It's a wrap. Like it's just not held on long enough. Not really going to help you right now. I think that means a lot more for the Herb Joneses, Trey Murphy, the third. I think they'll definitely get some more run. Josh Richardson potentially, if he can come back from we'll see how he looks in his return to the lineup, but he's been pretty good, at least streaming worthy. But yeah, unfortunate for fantasy managers not to have Zion Williamson at this stretch of the season.
Yeah, it's pretty much over.
So let's talk about the rest of the schedule for week 20. I think top of mind is avoid the Minnesota Timberwolves. They only have one more game left. Not going to get much out of, Naz Reid. I would still hold on to Kyle Anderson. Don't get crazy. Because they do play 4 games the next week. Yeah. But trying to think of who else was like a fringe guy that maybe you would pick up. What are your thoughts on Mike Conley, actually, since coming over to the Minnesota Timberwolves? Is he a hold for you?
Yeah, barely, but he's a hold because he's going to start. Like there are times where he can be out there for about 4 or 5 minutes and not really be in any playmaking opportunities. But I think he's a hold. It's been interesting to see the impact that his arrivals had on Rudy Gobert. Yeah. Getting him to play better basketball. But yeah, I think Conley, you hold on to him for now, especially as you mentioned, 4-game week next week. But he may be someone who's kind of a roster casualty later in fantasy playoff time, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, it has been better for Rudy Gobert. No surprise there that they actually get a true point guard, not D'Angelo Russell, who's always looking for his shot. But three teams that I think would be worthwhile to look at in terms of streaming for the rest of the week: the Nuggets, the Nets, and what was the other team I had there? Nuggets, Nets, and the Wizards. Because there's a 10-game slate on Saturday, and all three of those teams avoid that slate. So Bruce Brown, 50% rostered in Yahoo leagues, think he could definitely be an opportunity to pick up. DeLon Wright, I mean, he's just been absolutely amazing. Monty Morris is said to return. I don't think that's going to impact him too much. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you also have Daniel Gafford, who's been solid, got the game-winning layup. Was it last night or 2 nights ago?
Night. Yeah,
last night. Yeah. Low-end double-double definitely gives you a block or two. So I think that those guys are definitely people you could target. From the Nets, it's a little tricky, though, because, I don't know, Jacques Vaughn's still trying to figure out this lineup. Royce O'Neal re-entered the picture, getting over 30 minutes in their last game last night. Is there anyone else that you think that you would consider from any of those teams or any other teams that you're looking at in the remainder of the week?
I think I'd steer clear of the Nets personally, just because of how fluid that situation's been on the wings. And the guys that you'd probably target to pick up, they're already rostered in a lot of leagues anyway. You know, Royce O'Neal was good for 3-pointers earlier this season, but I don't know if I can trust him to get 30 to 30 plus minutes per night moving forward, given the options that they have. So I think I would leave him alone. You mentioned DeLon, right? I think he's someone I would hold on to even after Morris returns, because he's gonna be effective for assists and steals, and those are categories that can be really important when you're talking about head-to-head leagues in a playoff matchup. So I would hold on to him. Atlanta's also got 3 games the remainder of the week, but I don't know if I can trust anyone outside of Okongwu, and he's already rostered in a lot of leagues. So we've seen Jalen Johnson pick up a few more minutes. Can't really go there with him or with AJ Griffin, but I think one guy I would throw out there, Aaron Wiggins in Oklahoma City. He started last night. No Jalen Williams. He played well early this season when the Thunder were without Williams to start the year. He played a lot of minutes, I should say. So I could see him getting 32 minutes per game or so. And I think that's worth rolling the dice on. You have 3 more games this week.
Yeah, he had 13 points, 4 dimes, and a couple of stocks. And he's pretty good at getting steals. So I like that call. That's definitely a nice little deep find there. Only 3% rostered in Yahoo leagues. Any concerns on the back-to-back schedule for the rest of the week here?
We touched on Oklahoma City earlier. Not too concerned about the Knicks. The Pelicans are in desperation mode, so I'm not too concerned there either.
Right.
Maybe Miami, but I think they're in a better spot in Oklahoma City based on the standings. But that's another team where they're going to have to play their big guns a lot of minutes as they try to get out of those play-in spots.
Yeah, speaking of playing spots, I don't know how to make that segue, but the Players' Championship is going down. Don't miss Rory McIlroy, John Rahm. God, I can't even say these people's names. And Justin Thomas as the best golfers in the world take on the 17th Island Green and go head-to-head at the Players today through Sunday on NBC, Golf, and Peacock. So I won't be tuning into it, but I'm sure you guys, if you're really into golf, this is what you should definitely be watching. But we got fantasy basketball to worry about. So we were talking about several different players. I want to throw out a couple other names for this week specifically. Cam Reddish, we talked about him. I think he's definitely a person that you want to add with the Portland Trailblazers playing 3 games the rest of the way of this week. Jalen McDaniels, want to get your thoughts on him. Since coming over to the Sixers, James Harden's been out of the lineup. Tobias Harris was hurt for a little bit. D'Anthony Melton's been kind of up and down, splitting with Tyrese Maxey. They flipped. Now Maxey's in the starting lineup. But I think Jalen McDaniels is actually kind of forming a role here in the rotation. Minutes over George Niang. He's going to be an important piece for the Sixers. Do you see him actually being fantasy viable, at least coming up? Because the Sixers are actually one of the better teams in Week 21 and Week 22 with 4 games each.
I think that's going to depend on the health of Tobias Harris and PJ Tucker. They were both out the other night, so McDaniels got the start. I look at him as a streamer based on the role. I don't know if he's someone that I would hold on to, just because when everyone's healthy, it's been pretty tough for him to get, like, say, the 20 to 25 minutes I think he would need to be relevant. So, yeah, I think he's a streamer at best for me personally.
Okay. And another name I want to throw out there, Jonathan Kuminga, 27% rostered. So Anthony Lamb was getting 20 minutes per night, but he was on a two-way contract, and that's since expired. He hit his max number of games at 50. So they got to give him a regular contract or he won't be able to suit up again. So that actually, I think, opens up more opportunities for Kuminga, who balled out last night. And I think he's going to be a nice fixture of this defense because they're going to need someone with some versatility while Wiggins is out to be able to guard multiple positions, but also just get those hustle plays and attack the rim. So I think Kuminga is actually going to have some staying power here for the next couple of weeks. Now, the Warriors only play 2 games the rest of the week, but they do have 4 games next week and in week 22. So I think Kuminga is a person that you can get right now, very affordable, that can definitely help you in points, rebounds, and stocks. He did have 5 stocks a couple of nights ago. So don't sleep on Jonathan Kuminga.
Yeah, that's a good call there.
And all right, let's go to week 21. Or before we do that, let's do some buy, sell, hold. Mo Wagner's been playing really well with Wendell Carter out. Do you think that Mo Wagner's a person you can trust going into week 21 and beyond?
That's a good question. I think if anything, with that 4-game week coming up, he might be someone to look into because he was playing rotation minutes even when Wendell Carter was available. Orlando hasn't thrown in the towel in the season yet, nor should they, because they're pretty close.
Yeah, they're in there.
They're only a couple games back of that last play-in spot, if I'm not mistaken. So 4 games next week. You've got 2 more this week. So, yeah, I think if Mo Wagner is available, I think he's worth the risk.
I do too. Until we get some more clarity on the day-to-day situation of Carter, I think you got to keep rolling with Mo. And he's also producing in limited minutes too. Yeah. So, I think that Mo is definitely a person that I would keep my eye on going forward. What about Chris Dunn? He's been a very interesting player because while Taylor Horton-Tucker has been getting, the starters minutes and playing all right, but he's a turnover machine. Mm-hmm. Chris Dunn's been doing his thing. And he corrected his shot. He's been shooting very well from the perimeter. He can get downhill, but he's also doing like what I think people are expecting Dennis Smith Jr. to do, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, something like that, with also a couple of steals. What are you doing with Chris Dunn? Do you think that he can hold on to his role in Utah?
I think he can. The tough thing for fantasy managers is the schedule. They play 2 more this week, but then you only have 2 games in week 21. I think that's the biggest issue for him because, like you mentioned, he does a good job of running the team. They've given him more minutes just because he's not turning the ball over like THT does. So I think if you've picked him up, you're in a difficult spot because he's clearly going to have value. It's just that, are you going to be able to get enough out of him with only 2 games on that schedule next week?
Yeah, speaking of 2 games, might as well mention it. The Knicks also play 2 games and the Hornets as well. So as I mentioned, Dennis Smith Jr., I think he's going to be a person that I don't know that he's a must roster going into next week if you need to get those additional production from, other players. And the good thing about week 2021 is that it's pretty evenly distributed in terms of games played. There's not any big slates that are more than 9 games. So you actually should be able to play most of the players that you pick up on the waivers, which is pretty rare. So that's just making it a little bit easier for fantasy managers. But teams with 4 games, think it definitely makes sense to target the Suns, Bucks, Pistons, and Kings in the beginning of the week because they all play 3 games in 4 nights. Now, obviously, there's going to be some risk coming with the back-to-backs for the Suns and the Bucks with Giannis and Durant. I don't know that Booker's going to be managed. He hasn't really ever been load managed like that, but I don't know, Chris Paul maybe. But I'll definitely be concerned if I have Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo that they're going to take at least a game off. So just something to consider. Look for backups. The Bucks pretty much had everyone resting yesterday against the Magic, and Javon Carter went off. So that's a guy that I would certainly be paying attention to. If anyone's resting for the Bucks, he's a guy that always seems to have a nice uptick in usage and performance whenever he gets more time. What are your thoughts on week 21?
Yeah, I think San Antonio is a team that intrigues me too, just because they're well out of the play-in picture. They've had some guys miss significant amount of time due to injury. Like, how much are we going to see of, say, a Devin Vassell or a Trey Jones or even a Keldon Johnson? So I think, as we mentioned last week, Charles Bassey was a guy to drop just because the Spurs only played 2 games this week, first one being on Friday. Next week they've got 4. So if you're in the league with daily lineups, I think I would pick up Charles Bassey now and just hold on to him for the next week and a half and see where that takes you.
Yeah, I think that the Spurs are becoming the Detroit Pistons, where I was like, there's so many people and like everyone's in and out. And you're right. Like, Sohan missed last game with knee soreness. Malachi Branham's, he's been in and out now that Vassell is back and Keldon Johnson. There's a lot of fluidity with this rotation and what they're doing down the stretch here to kind of secure their chances in a lottery ticket. But yeah, I do agree with Charles Bassey because I think it's those backups that might step into some additional minutes if some of these, players that they don't want to risk injury to or just want to give more opportunity to. I think they want to see more out of Charles Bassey. He was with their G League affiliate for some time, but since he's been coming up, he's been playing really well along with Jop as well. Bates Jop was also playing pretty well for a couple of games there too. Yeah, the Spurs are definitely a weird team that I'm like, I want to invest, but it's just like, I just don't know who to invest in on a nightly basis. So just something you're going to have to do. Make sure you download the RotoWire app again, or Rotoworld app again. Don't go to the other thing I just mentioned to get your latest injury information. All right, so to close out real quick, just want to get your thoughts on, is there anyone that just really piques your interest in terms of like, I need to have this guy rostered for this home stretch here for the fantasy playoffs? It's so fluid, man. Like, I think it's hard to predict out, 2 weeks, but who's one guy that you're like, yeah, I'm definitely picking up this guy?
Yeah. I really don't know. I would say DeLon Wright. Like we mentioned him earlier, regardless of where he is in the rotation, I think he's going to play enough to provide good value. So DeLon's going to be one. Just mentioned Charles Bassey, but yeah, I think you're just kind of mining for reserves at this point because a lot of the other spots are really secure, I think, in terms of rotations.
Yeah, mine would be definitely DeLon Wright. I agree with that because, he was a top 60 player even when he wasn't starting. Yeah. And he takes care of the ball. Huge for steals. One of the best, has one of the most, I think it's like top 3 in steals since the trade deadline. So just a thief and just does it all. Shoots well from the free throw line, the efficiency from the field goal percentage. Like, there's nothing to not like about DeLon Wright. So I'm not worried about Monty Morris, especially as they're trying to make that playoff push. I love Kuminga for the next couple of weeks, as well as Donte DiVincenzo, without having any idea of what's going on with Andrew Wiggins. I think that those guys are going to have definitely some value for the next couple of weeks. And then the Warriors in week 23 will only play 3 games, but at that point, it's a free for all. So make sure you guys check back with us week 22, week 21. God, I can't even. I don't know, man. This has just been a hell of a week. Week 21, we'll be back next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you hit us up on Twitch for any questions you have. We would love to answer them. Hit us up on Twitter as well. Raph, have a great week. Good luck to all of your lineups as you approach the fantasy playoffs and everyone else out there. We'll see you next time. Peace.